Hello y'all, and in tonight's video we're going to be doing an election prediction between incumbent President Donald Trump against former Vice President Joe Biden. Of course, this is the most expected. Of course, a bunch of other scenarios could occur in the actual 2020 election, but this is the most probable at the moment. Today is September 7th, 2019. Of course, the election is more than a year away, but as of now, Joe Biden is leading in the polls by a good amount. Of course, Joe Biden being the vice president in the Obama administration, and Donald Trump, of course, being our incumbent president. So just to give y'all a quick preview of or how my election predictions are gonna work. We're basically just gonna fill in the safe states, like how most prediction channels do. How I do is I'll just simply color in the safe states for both candidates. So like in this instance, of course, Joe Biden would have safe states on the West Coast and on the eastern side. Of course, most states that we know would be safe. But yeah, of course, Joe Biden was the incumbent, the vice president, for the Obama administration, and Donald Trump, of course, who I believe did actually get a 50% approval rating in one of the most recent polls, which is the first time he's ever done this since he was inaugurated. But yeah, so this will be around our map, around 160 electoral votes to 150 for Joe Biden. But of course, as you see, most states are colored in for red, of course, in the central side, in the southern, and in the Great Plains for the president. And Joe Biden, of course, has most of his states in the western side and in the northeastern side. So a lot of states that you're gonna see come up that are gonna be toss-up states most of the time are in the Rust Belt, of course. Most states, of course, aren't going to necessarily change their mind drastically unless there's a huge shift in what the state believes. So, for example, a state like Iowa did drastically change. It voted for Barack Obama in 2008 and 12, but voted heavily for the president by around 9 to 10 points, along with Ohio, which of course are two states that President Obama won. But of course, the president did break the so-called blue wall in the Rust Belt for the Democrats. And necessarily all the predictions that the president has are mostly with him winning the Rust Belt again. And the fact of the matter is that Joe Biden, to win this election as well, is going to have to do the same. He's going to have to win back the Rust Belt. He's going to have to win states like Wisconsin, like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, which is his birth state. So we'll start in the northeastern states. New Hampshire. This state voted, I believe, for Hillary Clinton by 0.1%, which was the closest state, the final state, I believe, actually to be called in the 2016 presidential election. The fact of the matter is that I don't believe at the moment, I have to be convinced otherwise, that the president's approval rating has risen. Of course, just to be frank with you, approval rating doesn't mean anything when it comes to presidential elections. The fact is that, as we saw in the 2016 election, that the polls weren't necessarily correct, but not necessarily because they were wrong, but necessarily just because most people were either too afraid or just didn't want to say that they supported the president because they were either too nervous, too scared, or they honestly just didn't care. That's why in some states, like a state like Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, or New Hampshire, or other states that I could go and say they were handily in favor for Secretary Hillary Clinton despite going for the president in the actual election. So I do believe that Joe Biden would win New Hampshire. I do believe, though, that although he would win one congressional district in Maine, I believe that the president would win another congressional district in Maine, because the fact is that his approval rating in the state of Maine is actually higher than what most states that voted for Hillary Clinton are, with the exception of, I believe, Nevada being the only other state that has a higher approval rating for the president, despite voting for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Now moving on to more southern states, Georgia, 16 electoral votes, of course, voted for the president. I believe it will go again for the president. I don't believe a candidate like Joe Biden would be able to necessarily flip a state like Georgia. Of course, I do believe he would be able to get a good amount of the black vote out. Of course, I do believe Barack Obama will be an influence if Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee for the Democrats. Although I don't believe that he will do enough to flip a state like Georgia. On to Florida. This state's pretty special. I'll leave it for later. North Carolina, I do believe, will stay with the president. I don't see a way, unless something drastic happens from now to election day, for North Carolina to flip. Of course, they're going through terrible things. God bless them. But the most important thing right now, I don't believe, is that enough white folks, enough white people will actually switch parties, or not necessarily switch parties, but switch their vote from the president on to Joe Biden, because I just don't believe that he appeals to people in the South. Of course, North Carolina is somewhat of a southern state. You know, you have, of course, the 3 major cities, but I don't believe North Carolina will go to Joe Biden. It will go to the president. But I do believe Virginia will go to Joe Biden. Of course, it's gone to the Democrats in 3 straight elections. I believe it's been trending blue. Of course, they elected Ralph Northam by a surprising margin. I believe around 8, 9, not 10 points. So I do believe that will go to Joe Biden. Let's leave the Rust Belt for now. Let's go on to the western states. I believe Nevada, despite having I believe a favorable opinion for the president, I don't believe that Latinos will go in margins for the president, or at least I don't believe the president will improve his margins unless he does something drastic with his immigration reform, which I doubt it, unless he gets his border wall that he wants, which could help him or could not. But as of now, I don't believe he would win the state. Arizona is a close state. If you guys go check out my last video where Bernie Sanders, I did give this state to him just because I believe that people in Arizona, like young voters, Latinos, minorities, would be in favor of a candidate like Bernie Sanders, because he appeals to them. He's more energetic than Joe Biden. But so in this scenario, I don't believe Joe Biden would be able to take this state. I do believe he'll be able to take New Mexico, excuse me, because again, that state has been trending blue more recently. It voted for Al Gore, I believe, in 2000. Well, it voted for Democrats in the last 4 out of 5 elections, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Same thing with Colorado. It voted for Democrats in the last 3 elections. It's trending blue. It's having more blue stances. Of course, they have a Democratic governor, although they do have one Republican and 1 Democratic senator. I do believe that they will vote Democrat this election. The the congressional district of Nebraska, I don't believe will be contested that much by Joe Biden. Neither will Iowa, because although I do believe that Joe Biden can appeal to more farmers, more white working class voters, I just don't see a margin like 9 points being flipped from one side to the other, even if it was from the Democrats to the Republicans, or the Republicans to the Democrats, as it is in this scenario, because I don't see a way Joe Biden could really flip a state like Iowa. Although, like Minnesota, although it is trending more Republican, I don't believe in this case, or as of now, I don't believe it will go for Trump. It's just too blue at the moment. So now we really have the 5 states that will necessarily, almost certainly, decide this election, which are Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. 5 states that did actually vote for the president, all 5 of them actually. And I do believe that one state will, Ohio. Ohio, 18 electoral votes. I believe will go back to the president's column, because the fact is that I just don't believe that, again, another margin like 10 points will be shifted. I just don't see. Although I do see, of course, when I'm saying this, I'm not saying that, oh, these are going to be safe states forever. I just don't believe that there will be enough black voters out to vote for the vice president. There will be enough young voters going out for the vice president, which is why like I said, for Arizona, why I gave it to Bernie Sanders in my last video, and why I gave states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin to Bernie Sanders, because I just don't see a person like Joe Biden being appealing enough to bring out more of these young voters and these white people, these white working class people, which, like, in a state like Ohio. Although I do see it happening in a state like Pennsylvania. Of course, this is Joe Biden's birth state. He was born in Scranton. Of course, it's a very close and a very toss-up county that usually decides the state of Pennsylvania around the center part of the state, or the western part of the state, or the suburbs. Usually do end up deciding the state of Pennsylvania in Senate elections, not House elections, but presidential and Senate elections, or gubernatorial, basically state elections or national elections. So at this point, 3 states remain: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Florida, which make a total up of around, they make 55 electoral votes. So I do see, in fact, actually a state like Florida actually going back to the president. I just don't see. I do believe that the president actually has a good amount of appeal in the state of Florida. Although Barack Obama did win Florida twice, they were by extremely short margins, by around 2-3 points, 1 point. But of course, the president did win it. President Trump did win the state by around 3 points, I believe. And he had a good lead throughout the whole night, or at least with around 70% of the precincts reporting. So, and that's not usual. Usually, the race is pretty close until around like 95%. But I do believe he can really appeal to the elderly, older voters, and upper class people. I do believe he does pretty well in the big 3, which is the big 3 Democratic counties in southern Florida, which is Miami-Dade, Broward, and one other county, I can't remember, but it's 3 counties that vote Democratic usually. So basically, I believe the president has a really good shot at winning the state of Florida. So now only Wisconsin, Michigan remain. I personally don't see a state like Michigan going to the president. It was, I believe, the closest state that was flipped that voted for the president. It was around, it was under 1%. It was under 0.2%, I believe. But yeah, I don't believe a state like Michigan will go back to the president again. It was really close. But the fact of the matter is that Joe Biden is just too appealing to black voters, to minority voters who voted for Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. A state of Michigan actually did go very heavily for the president, or for President Obama, in both elections. So with one state left, Wisconsin, this of course was a state that Hillary Clinton never did actually visit in the 2016 election. With a state that President Trump did actually visit a lot. So of course, basically the winner take all. But the fact of the matter is that anyone could win this election. It's just too close. But for now, I'm gonna have to give it to Joe Biden, because it could honestly go either way. I'm not saying that 10 out of 10 times this would happen all the time. The fact is that, again, this is my best guess. The fact is that I just believe that the Rust Belt is something that Joe Biden appeals best to. He can appeal to factory workers, to people in unions, in more conservative and centrist Democrats that did vote for the president in 2016. But somebody, of course, growing up in the state of Pennsylvania, did actually live there for a while, he could easily appeal to them. So the fact is, I'm not saying 10 out of 10 times this election would happen, but my best guess would be that a candidate like Joe Biden would be maybe not necessarily the best case scenario for the Democrats, but I do believe it would help them win the election. But yeah, I guess we're gonna wrap up this video. Pretty long, to be honest, but yeah. So if you hope you can consider subscribing, considering dropping a comment below for any suggestions. Of course, I'll read all my comments. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, leave them down. Hope you consider subscribing, considering liking, and if you honestly do have any other suggestions, like not necessarily just election predictions, but like alternate history, election nights that you want me to do, I'll happily do them. Because I mean, why not? So yeah, I'll be posting more videos frequently now. I have more space, but yeah. So 278 to Joe Biden, to the president's 260 electoral votes. I hope you all did enjoy this video, and yeah, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.